putting up the best they could, but the 16 would keep jamming. They'd throw it down and try and grab another.
It's 1969, and I'm a lieutenant up on Hamburger Hill. We see shadows moving through the rain. I squeeze the trigger, nothing. My rifle has jammed again. My men are down, and the enemy's AK-47s fire on us with deadly reliability. By dawn, I'm haunted by the sight of my soldiers lying dead over their rifles, desperately trying to clear the jams. In those moments, we knew something was horribly wrong with the weapon supposed to protect us.
Back home, they told us this new M16 was a marvel, light as a dream and almost as deadly. 104,000 of the rifles were bought by November 1963. The Army and Air Force shipped them out fast, eager to replace the old M14 with this space-age plastic and aluminum rifle. At first, many of us believed it. A rifle with a smaller 5.56mm round meant we could carry more ammo and fire longer bursts. We had trust in the rifle that bore President Kennedy's support, but we soon learned that promise came with hidden costs.
Our battalion arrived in Vietnam in '65 carrying the M16. The airborne and cavalry divisions got them first. By late '65, the 101st Airborne had the XM16E1 in the bush for the first time. At first, we were excited. It was our future rifle, but whispers of trouble began almost immediately. Troops complained of stoppages and misfires, and by 1966, rumors were everywhere that the rifle was failing us. Orders were supposed to go out to exchange our M14s for these new rifles, but the first firefights in the jungles showed the XM16E1's flaws.
By summer 1966, rumors were reaching headquarters. M16s were jamming solid. One infantry commander reported that his men's confidence was to the extent that confidence has been degraded. General Westmoreland took notice and ordered a 6-week inspection tour in Vietnam. We were sure something was about to change. A Colt weapons expert came back and said he'd never seen equipment with such poor maintenance. He found many of us had never been properly trained on this weapon. Many had never even seen an M16 until we landed in Vietnam. In the field, our rifles were often left dirty after patrols. The expert found rifles caked with grime, feed ramps chewed up, barrels corroded. It was hard to argue with what he saw. Whole units of our infantry carrying M16s that hadn't been maintained. This was worse than an engineering problem. It was a training and supply breakdown.
The worst rumor of all turned out to be true. Many troops had been misled that the M16 was self-cleaning. In reality, cleaning kits were almost non-existent. We had no cleaning rods or proper brushes for months. Many believed Colt's own line that the rifle didn't need cleaning. By the time field stores dribbled in cleaning gear, the damage was done. It was months later before most units finally received the promised cleaning kits, an outrage some historians later called criminal negligence. Without kits or training, we were firing dirty rifles into monsoon mud and calling it good. The machine that was supposed to help us survive was failing us.
Another reason behind the jams was fit-in the ammo. In 1963, the Army switched to a cheaper, ball-shaped gunpowder, WC-846, to meet a new velocity requirement. It shot faster, but at a cost. The new propellant burned much dirtier, gumming up the action. Every round we fired left a half-melted residue caking the chamber. In the jungle heat, that powder residue solidified like varnish. We didn't know it at the time, but researchers later confirmed. We were firing the exact wrong ammo for that climate. The Army had insisted on the hottest ammo specs, and it fouled the M16 like nothing else. Our gun's tolerance for grime was gone. Even a few hundred rounds made them stop. The Vietnamese climate only made things worse. We had no chrome plating on the chamber, supposedly a cost-saving measure, so humidity and carbon literally rotted the bore. Magazine libs bent easily in the mud, causing rounds to catch. Brass cases were too soft. Often the rims tore off on extraction. Aluminum parts rusted. Plastic stocks began to crack under stress. By day's end, our rifles were slime-covered and locked up. I lost count of how many times my rifle jammed in the rainforest. I saw empty brass with teeth ripped out and heard the click-click of failure instead of my round going out. Every firefight became a desperate struggle with the rifle as much as with the enemy.
In the chaos of battle, a jammed rifle was deadly.
Reports from the front line eventually showed up to 30% of our M16s failing in combat. That meant almost a third of our men arrived without working rifles. A malfunctioning weapon wasn't just embarrassing, it was fatal. Fellow soldiers fell, gunned down while wrestling with broken brass and dirty bolts, still wedged over their rifles. Narration. We heard it again and again. Jammed guns were contributing to deaths. A fire team that couldn't fire back was meat on the ground. I watched my own squad mate, a sharpshooter, scream when his M16 seized. He dropped. Others panicked knowing their rifles could fail too. Fear replaced confidence every time we pulled the trigger. The American people got wind of it soon enough. News reporters began sending back chilling stories, GIs dying face down in mud because of hopelessly jammed rifles. On TV and in papers, families saw pictures of young men laid out beside their rifles. The nation was justifiably furious. Congress held hearings. Politicians demanded answers. How could our rifles fail us, they asked. Did leadership rush an untested gun into a war? By late 1966, the press was covering the M16 scandal. One journalist wrote that we were being sent to battle with lousy rifles and that every technical snag was turning to tragedy. It became a political firestorm, and the blame game began. At long last, fixes were coming. The Army and Colt technicians met back in the States and overhauled the design. In late 1967, they rolled out the first new XM16E1s with much-needed upgrades. They installed a heavier recoil buffer to slow the cyclic rate and thicken the plastic stock for toughness. Crucially, they hard-chromed the chamber and bore so carbon and rust couldn't stick. Steel parts got phosphate coatings to prevent rust, and magazine lips were reinforced. New ammunition with cleaner burning powder was issued too. Combined with actual field cleaning, these changes finally cracked the problem.
The next generation was the M16A1. By early 1969, it was issuing to frontline units, and by 1970, it fully replaced the old XM16E1. All of a sudden, the jams nearly stopped. Soldiers who cleaned their guns regularly found them working as intended. We could spray whole magazines again without hiding under a duck. It was a relief, a real rifle finally. Metal parts stayed shiny, chambers stayed clean. But it had taken 4 years and countless lives to get there.
After the war, historians and journalists pieced it together. They pointed out that cleaning alone wasn't the only cure. Journalist C.J. Chivers later explains that the M16's failures were largely a function of engineering and cost savings baked into the rifle, not just lazy troops. For me, the scars remain. The M16 should have been our lifeline, not our curse. I lost friends, brave men who didn't make it home, partly because their gun gave out. That truth sank in slowly, but it was a lesson I never forgot.
Half a century later, the lesson still haunted us. In 2008, 9 American soldiers died in a firefight at Wanat, Afghanistan. They were armed mostly with M4 carbines, essentially shorter M16s. Those troops reported the same problem under fire. Their rifles overheated and jammed. In the bitter dawn light, Afghan insurgents who fired AK-47s suffered no malfunctions. It was eerily familiar. We realized the legacy lived on. The rifle that had been literally born in Vietnam still had its ghost in the sand of Helmand province. It reminded us that history was cyclical and that any flaw left unlearned can come back.
None of this was Colonel Stoner's fault. His AR-15 was a brilliant design. But as one historian wrote, the Army militarized it with more than 100 changes, and the cost in dead soldiers was horrific. The small bullet worked wonders on paper, but the bureaucratic rush from weapons committees to arsenals killed the original rifle's reliability. It was a bitter irony. We had a rifle made for jungle guerrillas, but the compromises meant it almost failed us there. The young men who died did so not only at the hands of the enemy, but at the hands of decisions made far away. Remembering that helps us honor them.
Why did the M16 get Americans killed in Vietnam? Because it was put into our hands too soon, with the wrong ammo and without proper support. Reliability wasn't tested under Vietnam conditions before deployment. Cleaning kits and training came way too late. By then, too many of us had already fallen. The weapon's design had been twisted by politics and cost-cutting in a way that only war could reveal.
I survived, but I carry the cost. We honor the memory of those who didn't by telling the truth. Never send soldiers to fight with lousy gear. Every rifle, every bullet, every kit must work flawlessly. It is a matter of life and death. That is the lesson the jungle taught us, and one we can't afford to forget.